We're live. Welcome to Trampled.
Yeah. Welcome to the Trampled Underfoot podcast live on YouTube. My name is Mark.
And my name is Eloy.
What's your name? No, never mind.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your. We're gonna do something very different on this podcast. We're gonna sit back and listen to you. So you tell us. Go ahead. Start now.
Who, me?
No, I'm talking to the audience. You know.
To the crowd? Yes. Tell
Yeah.
us about yourself. What do you know? What do you see? What do you feel? What are you thinking?
Do you think that if we So the other night, a few nights ago, we were talking about music, which is one of the topics that we really like to talk about, and we're kind of partial to rock and roll music, generally speaking. That's sort of the. I don't know if that's fair to say to include you in that, but I think it is.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
I think it's fair to say to include you in the rock and roll category.
Oh, yeah.
And likewise myself. We were talking about. So we both like these two musicians, both Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix, but we both at the same time at the end of the day, when you're asked the question, I don't know who asked it, but somebody said, yeah, but who's better or something like that, you know.
Yeah, I do know. I
so
remember. I remember it well.
so at the end of the day, don't you have to pick one, right? And you have to have your personal reasons
hmm
why.
hmm
And so I picked Jimi Hendrix and you picked.
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah, and I love Stevie Ray Vaughan, but anyways, we were on that, and I don't know if there's any comments towards that you might have.
Just that I'm right.
Well, um,
No,
so
in my opinion, I think he was the greatest guitarist to live.
yeah,
I,
yeah, that's a tough one for me. Who?
yeah,
Jimi Hendrix? Of course he was.
well, SRV. No, we got into this discussion. I mean, and it was a long, drawn out discussion, but the basic, I guess we boiled it down to you thought that Jimmy was such an innovator and such a, um, what did you call it? The only thing I can think of is breakthrough, trailblazer. He
Yeah,
was
that's a
full of
vibe.
experimentation, and that uh, so he set the standard. And I maintained that that was, while it wasn't easy for him to do, it's easy for us to think that because there was nobody to compare him to. Well, now that you have Jimmy to compare other people to, there's always going to be that back and forth. He was the first, and he's damn good. Don't get me wrong. I love Jimi Hendrix, but I think Stevie Ray had just a little bit something more. Now, you could say that it's tech. Stevie Ray had technology on his side. He had different effects, but the effects that he used were available to Jimmy as well at the time. Maybe under a different brand name, but you had the Crybaby wah pedal, things like that
I've
that
got
he
something
used.
to add to that. When
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
so there's so much in that.
hmm
So I don't completely disagree with that, but I'm also partial to Jimi Hendrix. Okay, so I, how could I put this in the clearest way? I'm more of a fan of Jimi Hendrix, the recording artist, than Jimi Hendrix, the live performer. You know what I'm saying? And because of the way he would layer songs and music and this and that. So
Right.
that's where I'm coming from when I say, because live he can be very dirty and messy and very like just letting the lead go and the distortion just wobble into the, and he could control and maintain, but it's still I'm more liking, like, are you experienced the full album from start to finish, listening to that and listening to how he did that. So that's where I'm coming from with that. But when you said the pedals and whatnot, Jimi Hendrix was used as a test for all these up and coming companies at the
Right.
time that did not exist, and they would actually bring them. And some of them, I'm not sure because it's been a long time since I read the biography and whatnot, but a lot of these companies built stuff for him specifically, or that he would suggest, and then that they would figure out something to that effect. And so,
Right.
So it was just a magical moment. It's kind of like a magical moment, but of course, Stevie Ray Vaughan is a beast. But within, he stayed within roughly the blues category, whereas Jimmy went into the, and I kind of like that sort of thing. I don't know. There's no right answer, I think.
Well, again, Stevie did have the advantage of having that technology already developed, and he exploited it, believe me. Because it is, as you said, a lot of Hendrix's effects were being developed for him, either at his request or other people would bring stuff to him to see if he liked it, and help them develop a product line and what have you. Because when Jimmy, we should always also remember that when Jimmy was in his heyday, both as a studio performer and as a live performer, a lot of what is available now and is taken for granted either wasn't around or was still being developed. And that's why I say there was nobody to compare Hendrix to. There was nothing even close. I mean, sure, people had turned up the gain and turned up the distortion on an electric guitar. It had been done. But he pushed it and pushed effects to such high limits that, I mean, we can only leave it to speculation to figure out where he would have gone given 5 or 6 more years, which direction music would have gone given 5 or 6 more years.
Yeah.
And also, having said that, I do like Stevie Ray Vaughan just a little bit better. Some of my favorite Stevie Ray Vaughan tunes are covers of Jimi Hendrix songs. Voodoo Child, Little Wing, Third Stone from the Sun, things like that. So he played them as an homage to Hendrix, but I think he played them even live. I think he played them just a little bit better than Hendrix.
Yeah, you're trying.
It was Hendrix's song.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying.
Because think about it, there are not many people who can play a Hendrix tune and do it justice.
Okay, can I fire back here?
Sure. Go for it.
Can the court please allow one defense attorney for Jimi Hendrix to approach the bench?
Go right ahead, man.
Because those words struck me like daggers, I will say.
Daggers.
Yeah, daggers, man. Okay, well, here's the problem. So certain key words that you used, I was triggered. Here's the problem. You're loco, man. You crazy. What you saying don't make sense, man. Here's the problem. That Jimi Hendrix. Okay, first I'll concede these things to you so that, but it never works. If I concede a little bit, and I'm not saying for you, like in a general sense, if you concede a little bit so that, all of a sudden it's like game over, but I'm going to do that because I also like Stevie.
This is not a competition, man. This is personal opinion. I mean, I'm not out to change your mind. I'm telling you why I think what I think.
It's very personal right about now. Okay, here's the thing. I'll concede this. Stevie Ray Vaughan, from the moment I heard him, I was consuming everything that he made. Everything. And this is back in the 90s. Maybe it was 90. Right when he passed away is when I really picked up on him. It's sad to say, but... Yeah.
A lot of people did.
And I just bought everything I bought books, tablature books, everything, like consuming. And by the way, at the time, my friends were totally, because it was like the grunge, the awakening of the grunge.
Okay.
And like all the hair metal was like starting to become passe. And they were like, no, man, no more blues, Eloy. Like we'd play in bands and stuff. Oh, there goes Eloy playing the blues again. And that kind of attitude towards me. Mm-hmm. It never fails. It's like a historical thing that occurs, you know. Um, but Stevie Ray Vaughan, to give him his dues, you are right about, for instance, when you said his live versions of Jimi Hendrix song, the first thing that came to mind wasn't Little Wing, although it's freaking fantastic, that Stevie Ray Vaughan Little Wing. But the first one that came to mind, for some reason, was Third Stone from the Sun, and him playing it at El Macambo
Mm-hmm.
in that little VHS tape that used to go around.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I I have to tell you, I can see it in that aspect, because I can sit through that whole concert and love it and feel like the goose pimples up my neck. I love that. So I can't, you know, but I will say in the defense of Jimi Hendrix,
Mm-hmm.
which by the way I haven't been doing such a great job about by saying this about Stevie Ray Vaughan, but in defense of Jimi Hendrix, he it's different with the quality also of recording equipment, because Hendrix had to deal with a more basic 4-track than 8-track, and then there was with Electric Ladyland it started to escalate and stuff, but the recordings still weren't what they were in the 80s, like during
Right.
Stevie Ray's time. So
Right.
people also, not you, and maybe not many of our listeners, and definitely not me, because I like the grit in audio from the 60s. I actually, last thing I'll say about this, I don't even know if I defended Jimi Hendrix well enough, but um, George Harrison said that because they asked him, well, what kind of music do you listen to George Harrison? And George Harrison said, to be honest with you, I like the old music. Like he was talking about Fat Swaller and like going back, and Lead Belly and like going back, and he says, and I don't mind, I prefer the grain or something to that. I'm paraphrasing. He prefers the dirt and the whiskers, you know, roughing up that audio. And I have no problem with it myself, you know. So, but some people might be biased because of that aspect, the quality of the sound.
And I'm of the same. I'm the same as that. And again, like I say, it's not that I don't like Hendrix. You're absolutely right. Hendrix was dealing with less technology, and it was being developed at the time, and so he didn't have a lot of the things that are available to musicians. Heck, even in the '80s, when Stevie Ray was blazing away. But and in fact, my absolute two favorite cuts off of the Woodstock album, my all-time absolute favorite live performance by any band is Santana, Soul Sacrifice, on that album.
Beautiful.
Just absolute favorite live performance by anybody.
What a beautiful song.
My second favorite is Hendrix's set at the very end on side 6, where he's up there playing around with the wah-wah pedal, and you think he's going to go into Voodoo Child, but he doesn't. And he's telling folks, all right, you can leave if you want to. We're just jamming, that's all. You can leave, it's all right. And he just gets into it and just starts playing and just starts jamming. And then he does the Star Spangled Banner, then goes into Purple Haze. And that's like my second favorite live performance. But it's my second favorite cut off of that album, and it's my second favorite live performance. But then everything beyond that, it's all SRV. All SRV.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll put up Stevie Ray Vaughan's El Macambo up above all the other lives that he did, even including the one where he hung out with what's this guy's name, the blues guitarist,
Albert King.
Even that one, yeah. Here's the thing with the El Macambo performance. Stevie Ray Vaughan had already a contract signed and an album out, and he was rocking it, but it was just a few years removed from the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And he's playing, as opposed to in a huge arena or concert hall, he's playing in a club that you or I would typically frequent, and we know the vibe and the smell of the beer and the people sitting, and maybe somebody's chatting away, and that ambiance,
Mhm.
it it actually comes through in that. What a
Yeah,
great Elma combo,
yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan. It's so to
You
me, it's one of my favorite concerts ever, and it's
mhm.
in a club.
Yeah, and but you get that small venue feel,
Yeah,
and you know he didn't have to do that because it's like you said, he had a contract, he was recording. He
yeah.
didn't have to do that, but he did it. You know, there was well, he did a lot of things back then that he didn't have to do, but he always was a player and a performer at heart. And he said many times that the number one thing was to make music. And so if he could find a venue, he'd play it.
Now, I want to say one thing too, because I don't want to abandon Jimi Hendrix. That
Mm.
so there are concrete things that you can say, and there were a lot of people back in the '60s that were revolutionizing music. Um, Jimi Hendrix, you had a pure rock and roll, whatever that might mean, but that beginning rock and roll that transitioned from the blues or boogie woogie out of the 20s and 30s and even earlier, frankly, with the tack pianos back in the saloons and whatnot, the three chords progressing that create the two chords and then the shuffle and then the turnaround, like that whole thing is something that's very American.
Right.
I mean, you could put anything on top. It's like a bun and whatever condiments you want to put on top of it is the
Right.
blues, the basic rhythm of the thing. But in the '60s, something happened that it started happening in the '60s, and I think the Beatles also initiated it. But they took those traditional things, and either because what a strange thing. I don't understand it clearly, but they took the music that was traditional and started to sort of like tweak it in places that you should not, not that you should not, but I'm just saying that you would not expect or even think that would be necessary. And they started doing these things, and then you get all these sounds from the '60s, which absolutely, we could be in the future 500 years from now. That transition from that old sound and then coming into that '60s where the psychedelics came in, Jimi Hendrix part of it, and he came in the later part of the '60s with it. Um, for the public at large, he changed song structures and the way the guitar. It was just such an amazing. So his dues, absolutely. I have a higher threshold of respect and for Jimi Hendrix, but of course Stevie Ray Vaughan. But because of the situation and times,
Mhm.
you know.
Right.
So.
And they were in two different times and they were in two different situations. But let's not forget, you said a couple of things in there. Let's not forget that Hendrix was a blues man too. Red House, Catfish Blues, a lot of Hendrix's stuff was blues and blues based. He just amped it up. He just shoved. I mean, he didn't push the technology and push the envelope. He leaned into it and shoved that sucker as hard and as fast as he could. And it was also during that transitional period in the blues when electric guitar was coming in. And you had, Muddy Waters and you had John Lee Hooker, all of them, B.B. King, all of them with electric guitar and getting popular in the blues genre as well. So there was that revolution going on just about everywhere. As a matter of fact, it was starting to creep into country western music a little bit, but more along the lines of the pedal steel guitar. Not so much with a electric guitar. Um, you know,
Although
it,
later,
but later that came in
yeah.
exactly, and so it was happening in all directions. But you're absolutely right; it was a revolution. It was like um, Les Paul pushed the electric guitar so far, but with maintaining his signature clean sound.
And very American.
Oh yeah.
It's very in line. You
Hmm.
cannot mistake that. It's a very American. Les Paul is very much high end,
Yep.
incredible, but very much it feels like, this
Well,
country.
Les Paul and his wife, Mary Ford, were one of the most popular acts out there in music. Les Paul and Mary Ford was huge.
I will say one thing. I don't know if I'm right about this, but I'm just gonna blurt it out and see what the reaction is.
That
When the '60s came along, according to what I've read, and I've done a lot of reading on this particular subject because I just enjoy it. It's just fascinating to me. Um, you had a in the '50s, you had a drop off. Elvis joins the army, or he was drafted, or he joined, and all these things were happening. Um, what's this guy's name? Chuck Berry got
yeah,
busted for transporting a girl over the state line to get married, some sort of thing like
yeah,
that.
that was a bunch of hokey, ginned up stuff. But yeah,
But just so all the big acts that were considered dangerous were getting, like, hit with a slap upside the head. And you have these people in England, British people generally, Great Britain, sort of picking up on, and you hear this a lot also in documentaries, records that sailors would bring over, and the Beatles talk about this, and many other bands talk about this. And then, we're talking things that we know. The British invasion starts to occur as well in the '60s. But the thing that I wanted to add to it is, in my perception, they got the blues, they got the rock and roll, they took it and started to regurgitate, repeat, but they sent it back with a third element of British.
right. They made it their own. They took the sound and made it their own.
Well, if you think about it, um, if you extract blues and you think of Europe minus the blues, I don't want to, but it's more classical, more minstrel, more, you don't have that. And
And there
so,
were a few bands that did capitalize on that. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, just the part that I wanted to land on was that sound created rock and roll in this new version that had those divergent chord structures and whatnot, and that just opened up the frickin' gates into such weird. Even for this day, people that listen, kids today, I'm gonna be a little hard here, but kids that listen today and they don't hear that pumping electronic beat, or they don't hear those
Mm-hmm.
weird synthesize, and the guy, they don't hear, and they say, and if they hear an old six, and they, that's nothing. They're not. There's no way they're comprehending the immensity of these songs, and I'm biased, you know, in favor of the old rock and roll.
Well, but they were inventing the genre as they went along. They were discovering what was popular and what was not. I mean, that Mersey beat, you had the London Underground scene. You had, I mean, if you give somebody Pink Floyd's A Piper at the Gates of Dawn and you put that on with Syd Barrett and the rest of them, see, I don't remember if David Gilmour was with them then. I think he was.
He was a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and he was but he wasn't in the band.
Right. But if you gave that to them, they wouldn't know what the hell they were listening to. Put on some of the early Who. You know, you don't even have to go that early. Baba O'Reilly or We Don't Get Fooled Again. The way that everything is changing up, it's quintessential British rock. I mean, different amplifier setups. You had the orange amps. You didn't have Fender amps. You know, it was they weren't playing through a Marshall stack. You know, it was an entirely different sound and an entirely different feel. And some folks over here just fell in love with it. Others didn't really. I've heard it said that a lot of the British rock that came over after the Beatles, but a lot of the British rock that came along, like the Stones, the Who, uh, was colder. It it
Yeah.
it seemed cold, not as much bass, even though, I mean, The Who was the first band to actually feature the bass and give John Entwistle a solo.
Yeah.
But it was not enough bass. There was still a lot of treble to it. They stayed in the higher registers with the bass, and it just had a different feel to it. And you either loved it or you hate it. And I can remember this. I mean, I was becoming aware of music at about that time. We're looking at, I'm about 7, 8, 9 years old. I wasn't super hot and heavy into it, but I can remember what was American popular music at the time, because Jimi Hendrix was not mainstream. He was considered, that what he played was considered back then acid rock.
Right.
They didn't know how to categorize him because it was brand new and it was not mainstream. You didn't turn on the radio and hear Jimi Hendrix. The first time I had ever heard of Jimi Hendrix was when Dad brought home the Woodstock album. I had no idea who he was because he wasn't on any of the radio stations we were listening to. You know, um, and me being 7, 8, 9 years old, I'm in the backseat of the car. I have zero control over what's on the radio, so I'm listening to what they're playing.
Yeah.
And I was hearing Creedence Clearwater, I was hearing Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but I was also hearing things like the 1910 Fruit Gum Company and things like that. When Janis Joplin come on the radio, Dad would change the channel because Mom didn't like to listen to that woman scream. I love Janis Joplin.
It's funny, but you had a whole sort of a potpourri bag
Mm-hmm.
of sounds coming from the radio, but now well, heck, radio is, I don't even, I mean, if I'm in the car I'll listen to it, but you used to be glued to the radio. The only reason I was exposed to all these things was mostly because I had my radio tuned to Magic 102.7, which was oldies, and in the 80s the oldies were the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
So
they called them oldies when I was growing up as well. And even though we were only about 10 years out of them, but the doo-wop groups, the Platters, let's see, the Platters, the Dell, God,
the
I can't
Penguins,
remember the name. Oh, the Penguins, Buddy Holly, they were considered oldies.
and it was
Even though
only
the
10.
music wasn't all that old. Yeah, you got to figure from 59 to 69 was 10 years. They were calling them oldies then.
That's
Yeah.
freaking crazy.
But you just nailed one little difference. You were listening to an FM station. Growing up, I mean, even up until I was like 16 or 17, it was all AM rock, AM top 40 rock. There was some pop in there, and you had a couple of different stations to go back and forth to. But AM was king because every car had an AM radio. I mean, you used to go down to Radio Shack and buy a little FM converter that you tapped into your radio and your speakers and plugged into your antenna, split off the antenna so that you could listen to FM in the car, and it mounted under the dash like an 8-track player or something,
Wow.
And FM radio was an option, and there weren't that many FM stations. I mean, now growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, there were a few, but I didn't start to get into FM rock until I was 17, 18 years old, with a couple of exceptions. There were a couple of stations down in California in the evening, later at night, I would turn on because I didn't like the evening DJs on the AM radio.
AM.
But it was mainly AM radio. AM top 40 radio was king.
Yeah, I was gonna say that stereo is a much more natural to life, although not exact, but a much more, because you can actually play with panning, and that helps a lot in creating dimension. And even though if you go back and listen to those old, like let's say Frank Sinatra, or even better, like a what's this guy's name, Nat King Cole.
Mm-hmm.
What they did with mono was amazing.
Yeah,
it was such a beautiful sound,
Well, most folks back then because you got to remember, we're getting back into differences in generations here. Back then, a stereo with 2 speakers was expensive. It was outrageous, and it was big because at the beginning of the transition from mono to stereo, it was all still vacuum tube, you know. And I can remember my dad and me going down with a paper bag full of tubes to Payless drugstore and put them in. They had a tube testing machine right up front. You plugged it into the plug and you hit the button, and the little meter would go up and tell you if it was good, bad, or ugly.
Amazing.
But it was all vacuum tube, so this equipment was huge. Our stereo was over 6 feet long. It was closer to 7 feet long. And that was one of their big main advertising features. You had to have 6 feet of separation from the speakers, or you couldn't really get the stereo effect from it. And it was a huge thing. It was like a sideboard that was 6-7 feet long and about 30 to 32 inches tall. And, it was beautiful furniture made to look early American or Mediterranean, whatever your style happened to be at the time.
Yeah.
And you had a little space to store your records, but 2 foot of each side of each end of the thing was speakers. And then you had your turntable receiver and a tape player if you had the money to upgrade to that. But they were hugely expensive. We're talking 3-4 months pay. And a TV was about the same. They were hugely expensive. It's not cheap like it is today.
We grew up, or I grew up. I'm still kind of cloudy on that, but so being born in the middle of the 70s, like that smack dab in the middle, and growing up, we had that console. But was that console left over from the 60s? I mean, were they still selling them in the 70s? I don't know those things.
In the 70s, component systems were starting to get popular. There were still huge console stereos out there, and they were still pretty popular. But component and rack systems were starting to get popular towards the late 70s because everybody, not everybody had room to put one of these things. And you could get cheap imported stereos for $50, which back then was still a big chunk of change. $50 was huge money. But you could get a little component stereo for about $50 that had a turntable on it, an AM/FM receiver, and a cassette deck. About the time you were born, for about $50.
Well, we had the turntable with the stereo or radio and 2 speakers on both sides, and we had these little grills with curtains behind the grills, and behind the curtains were the speakers.
Right.
And that was such a great piece of furniture.
Yeah, ours had ours was maple, early American style. That was my mom's style. And they were made out of maple, but they looked like louvers, like window shades.
Right.
So you'd had these horizontal slats. They were fixed. You couldn't open or close them. So you had these horizontal slats with this one slat applied to the front of them vertically. And it looked like window shutters. And behind that was black speaker cloth. And the speakers were back behind that.
Can we take I got to use the restroom real quick.
Oh no.
Can you keep it can you keep it hot?
I keep it going? I can. Yeah, well, all right, fine. This is a first. Go for it.
I got to pee.
Oh man, I'll take a look out here in the chat and see who's hanging out with us. SDM Custom Woodworking. How you doing, man? Steve from Harneal Media. Rusty Nails Wood Shop. Yeah. Ain't seen you around in a long time. I'm a blues man myself. Buddy Guy. I like Buddy Guy. We're going to leave that in the edit. You just watch me, Steve. Every time I say we're going to edit something out, and this is my edit this week. Every time I say I'm going to edit something out, I make it a point to keep it there. But yeah, I'm a serious blues man. I don't know if Eloy agrees with me or not. I'm of the firm belief that without blues, there would be no rock and roll. Because if you go back and you look at the development of rock and roll over the over the it seems like eons now. Oh my God. If you go back and you look over the decades, you cannot extract blues from rock and roll. And that's just all there is to it. And that discussion we were having earlier of who was better, Stevie Ray Vaughan or Jimi Hendrix, that was a friendly discussion. That wasn't really an argument. You know, I don't know if you could I don't know if you could separate the two. It would be, I tell you what, I would love to be in the front row at a head cutting competition between the two of them. That would be an absolute blast. But oh, I see you're back. Cool.
Well, you kept it going. I was like, awesome.
Well, that's one thing that the two things the military taught me how to do was run a buffer and talk trash on a roll.
Excellent. So, it comes in handy.
It does.
Who do we have in the chat?
Oh, we have SDM Custom Woodworking. We have Steve from Harneal Media. We have Russ over there at Rusty Nails Wood Shop. And then we got Billy Burt.
What's going on, everyone?
Oh, man.
So we had a discussion about Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and we got into a lot of really neat conversations. Do we have anything for like this day in history?
Well, I have a couple of things that are music related. This is going out, let's keep in mind, this is going out on May 7th. So when we say today in history, it's just imagine today is May 7th.
That's right.
But May 7th, 1966, the Mamas and the Papas, Monday, Monday, hit #1.
Awesome song.
Now, that is one group that I think is very underrated. They were big at the time, but they seem to have kind of fallen into obscurity. But you take something like Monday, Monday or California Dreamin' and you put it on now, and those harmonies, the presentation, man, the way they sing, it's just, it's still just as fantastic now as it was back then, to me anyway.
Their best of, which is what I bought. I didn't buy the individual, like whatever albums I bought the best of, and it's like a chuck full of awesome freaking songs. I saw her again. I saw her again last night. What a great group, and they just came together, and it was really like a motley crew, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it really was. You know, by the way, something that I don't know if folks know, but John Phillips and Michelle Phillips are the mother and father of Mackenzie Phillips, the actress.
Yeah, I knew.
She played the little girl Carol in American Graffiti, and of course she played the older sister in that sitcom One Day at a Time, and she's been in all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But so they really were mama and papa.
Yeah.
And Cass Elliot, you gotta say something about her voice. That woman had a voice.
Beautiful voice.
I'm telling you. And projection, clear enunciation. You could hear and understand every word in her vocal range. Just one hell of a voice. Another one that went way too soon. So, okay, so that was 1966, Monday, Monday hit #1. And here's one that'll be near and dear to your heart. May 7th, 1970, The Long and Winding Road became the Beatles' last American release.
Oh, wow.
It was the last single that they released in the U.S.
I just, from reading the biographies and doing all that, I remember that John Lennon they were all raw with each other by that time.
Yeah.
Hence they broke up, but John never appreciated too much the sappy stuff that what he would call sappy stuff that Paul would write, and within that genre of like of well, melancholia and slow ballad, like John wanted to be rock and roll, but that's one of those songs. It's a beautiful song. Beautiful song. I love it.
But the irony of that is John Lennon is known more in his solo career, is known more for ballads and sensitive music.
Yeah.
Stuff that he would have considered sappy back in the Beatles days.
It's funny how that works, but imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But oh boy, I had a point to this. I also found a little bit of irony, and maybe, I don't know, this, I don't like the word. I really despise the word closure. In that was Long and Winding Road was the last single release in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, think about the lyrics to The Long and Winding Road. It was just basically saying goodbye.
You're right.
And then it turns out that was the last one they released in the US.
It was like poetry.
Yeah. So, well, that was what I had for this day in history. Just a couple of them from music. I don't know. I don't know what folks think about us doing things like this day in history. A lot of it is about wars and what have you. And yeah, we could go back through what happened in World War II, but
there's some
where do you
things.
start?
Well, there's some things that are poignant and worth mentioning that are outside the sphere of doesn't have to be necessarily pop culture. So there are certain little moments in history that people would appreciate when they hear it, if they're listening to this and they come across, today's the day where John Lennon stood atop the rooftop concert thing. That's a bad example because that's going back to music.
Exactly. Well, but here's another one that's related to music that I know one person out in the chat would appreciate.
Yeah.
Today, May 7th, 1824, Ludwig von Beethoven's Ninth Symphony premiered in Vienna, often regarded as his greatest work.
What year?
1824.
Holy smokes.
Beethoven's Ninth Chorale.
Is that one? What's that one? Da, 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 da. No.
That sounds like Mozart.
Is it? Dun, 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 dun?
Nope, that was the fifth.
Was it Boinch?
That's the one. That's the one.
Okay.
That's the one. Today in 1718, the city of New Orleans was founded by Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne.
That's a big one.
Yep, in 718. Let's see. I'm just kind of going through and picking stuff.
And in 1985, and in 1985, in that state, we had a Harry Connick Jr. Come out with one of his first albums too. We have some good stuff from Louisiana.
Yep. More than just gumbo.
Oh yeah.
May 7th, 1789, the very first U.S. presidential inaugural ball for George Washington in New York City.
Holy smokes, man. See, there is some nice little gems.
Mm-hmm. May 7th, 1800, the Indiana Territory was organized.
Wow. 1900?
No, 1800.
Oh, okay. I was like, whoa.
1800. Did I say 19? I meant 18.
Maybe I heard 19 and I was wrong. Who cares?
I'll fix it in the edit.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, we already have a bathroom break, so
yeah. And as if it's my edit, it'll stay in there.
I'm sure you kept it. Well, there's people that do talk radio that just can do it with no other person. It's nice to have someone to bounce off of.
Yeah, but they spend a few hours prepping for the show. So they've got their show prep all done. They've got their notes sitting there. They've got their stacks of paperwork and everything, and plus computer monitors. I came in with a cup of coffee, you
Yeah.
know, and I sat down and I said, what are we going to do this week? This day, May 7th, 1913, the British House of Commons rejected the women's right to vote.
Ooh.
Shame
That
upon you.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they just rejected the women's right to vote.
Aren't they the ones that are pro that in recent years? Or I know everyone's pro that, but I'm saying,
Well, yeah, it's easy to get on board when it's popular.
oh, okay.
After the fact, you know.
Right. I get it. Okay.
So, you know, what can you say to that?
There's some good stuff. Going to
Oh yeah.
leave us without this the podcast.
Oh, May 7th, 1914, the U.S. Congress established Mother's Day.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, that's a nice thing. Now, wait a second. There's holidays that are like you don't no work days, and then there's holidays that are it's just a holiday, but you keep working. I know that that's one of the ones that you keep working. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Nobody ever got Mother's Day off unless it was on a weekend.
Right.
So, yeah. So
So
sorry.
so do we have any others before we go into weird and astounding facts about life, the universe, and everything?
Okay, no, we got to. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Because, yeah, I like this kind of thing. I'm done.
Okay. Well, so we're gonna go through some random facts that simply are there to astound. Some of them may not be, and I'll tell you know this very well, and I'll say this to the audience. We don't proofread these things prior.
No, we don't.
Um, we do not. So this is all spontaneous stuff, but
And
some of it. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and a little bit more inside baseball since we're doing this. I have no idea what Eloy has over there on his side of the screen. He's in Florida, the whole continent away. He didn't know what I had up on my screen. I don't know what he has. So he's getting my reaction at the same time you're getting it. So
That's the fact, folks. And I'll just say this one last thing before we get thick into this. Some of these may be wonderful and amaze you. Others you might know, and some you just won't believe. And then lastly, some you'll just say that's no good. So let's see what happens. So that's the warning before we get into this. So let's start off with number one. Did you know that Charles Darwin's personal pet tortoise did not die until recently?
I didn't know about his personal pet tortoise, but I know they live a long, long, long time.
So this is the down low on that. So technically she wasn't his pet, but after his tour of the Galapagos Islands, Darwin brought back a 5-year-old tortoise he named Harriet, and she outlived her adopter by 124 years, ultimately making it to a whopping 176 years of age. So Harriet, the tortoise, lived her final years as part of the family of Steve, the crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin,
Oh, really?
in Australia until she passed away in 2006. So Darwin in his life till 2006, and that tortoise was rocking the cash ball.
Yeah. I know there was a tortoise that was like a ship's mascot and I don't remember which ship it was. That was in the Crimean War, which was 1850s, 1853, 54, 55, somewhere right in there.
Right.
It died in like 2011,
Holy smoke.
2012. So yeah, they can live to be extremely old.
That
Out,
is, dude, that is amazing stuff.
mhm.
Jeez. So
Yep.
okay, I'm sorry. I know that the audience picks up on it quick, but hit me with from when it was born till when it died again, just so that I can.
Okay, I don't know. It was a tortoise. I don't know when it was born, but it
Okay,
was a ship's mascot during the Crimean War. So it could
which
have been a young pup. It could have been, you know, a few years old. I don't know.
well, give me a timeline of the.
But the Crimean War was fought. Okay, I'm looking it up. The Crimean War was fought from 1853 to 1856.
Holy smokes, man!
Right. So it lived from the 1850s into
The
the
2000.
2000s. It was like 2011.
Wow, man! I've got a story about tortoises, but it's kind of it's kind of a downer slightly.
Yeah, well, no, okay.
We'll skip it, or is just curiosity? Okay, how's this? If the chat has curiosity on it, I'll let us know, and we'll say it. It's not extreme, but it's sort of like so if you want to hear it, let us know. If you don't, well, we'll just keep going. So we'll go keep going for now. Uh let's see. So here's another one. The average person will spend 6 months of their life waiting for red lights to turn green, dude.
I would have thought it would be longer. I would have thought that would have been longer. It
Well,
just seems like longer.
so let's continue on. Here's a strange one that's just quirky. Nearly 30,000 rubber ducks were lost at sea in 1992. 30,000. And to this day, they're still being discovered all over the place because they float.
Well, obviously, but that's yeah, that's kind of strange. Now,
So,
I can say, containers fall overboard all the time.
yeah.
Things happen. They get out there in rough seas and what have you. And there was a few years back, and I don't remember where it was, when exactly it was. We weren't living here at the time, but a container fell off of a ship or broke open or something like that. And all of a sudden, Nike tennis shoes started washing ashore up here on the Oregon coast.
Wow,
Just
dude.
by the hundreds, tennis shoes, Nike tennis shoes started washing ashore. And people were running around grabbing them, and trading back and forth, trying to get matching, lefts and rights and what have you. It was a real scramble. And they were washing ashore for like a week and a half.
That's hilarious, dude.
Yeah.
Well, in the case of the rubber duckies, so the ship was traveling from Hong Kong to America, and the ship was one of the crates, like you said, were lost in the Pacific, and they had 28,000 rubber ducks. So you know, so people from all around the world,
Uh,
like from Australia to Alaska,
mhm.
they've seen these darn ducks floating in the water. And that's off of one crate, man. So go figure.
One crate of 28,000.
So here's a strange one, dude. I don't know how, since we talked about Darwin and all that, I don't necessarily know how this would work, but I'll just throw this at you that there's an actual ant that's specific to Manhattan. It's a Manhattan specific ant. Have you heard of that before?
No, I've not heard of it, but it doesn't really surprise me.
Okay, well, why not?
Well, because there are so many undiscovered and isolated species out there, um, that the fact that this one specific species of ant only grows on Manhattan, which, remember, it's an island actually. And
Yeah,
sure, they can now, get transported in our stuff and in cargo and what have you, or hitching rides in cars or what have you, or even walk across the bridge.
yeah,
But the fact that there's an ant that's specific to Manhattan is not really all that surprising.
Well, it's funny because it's Manhattan. Manhattan. It almost sounded like ant. That doesn't even rhyme. But so, for on Broadway between 63rd and 76th Street, biologists actually discovered that new species of ant, and they named it the Manhattan ant.
Yeah.
So that's a weird one, yeah. But well, it's not really weird, like you said.
Yep.
Okay, this is. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's strange that it's Manhattan, but it's not surprising that they found a new isolated species.
So I'm worried to even mention this one because I don't know how it's all gonna connect. But the inventor of the frisbee was turned into a frisbee after he died.
His ashes.
Let's see if that's that makes sense to me.
I'm willing to bet you.
Let's find out. So his name was Steady Ed. Hedrick invented the frisbee in the 1950s. So the frisbee comes from the 50s,
right?
And he went on to invent the sport of disc golf in the 70s as well.
Right.
He lived for frisbees, it says here, and his wife said that the inventor of the classic American toy, when he died in 2002, his final wish was that his ashes, there you go, turn into what else but a frisbee.
Right.
And his son said that it was his father's dream that they play with him after death, and that he might even accidentally end up on someone's roof.
Yeah. And I just found it. Per his wishes, his ashes were incorporated into a limited number of frisbees. They were given to friends and family, and the limited remaining discs were for sale, with all the proceeds going to a 501c3 nonprofit to fund the Steady Ed Memorial Disc Golf Museum at the PDGA International Disc Golf Center in Columbia County, Georgia. Why did I know it would be Georgia? Why did I know that?
So someone in the comments, and I think it's Garrett, he mentioned, and I'll just mention this because I saw this, and I don't know if we said this on the podcast or if I just don't know where, but I remember us being in the conversation at some point, and maybe it's not true, selective memory or whatnot. Maybe it's what do you call that? What's that syndrome that we talked about that one episode where people have a
false memory syndrome or something like that?
But we call it's called the Mandela effect, was it?
Yeah.
The Mandela. So maybe I'm having a Mandela effect moment, but I remember us talking about this. But Garrett says that I remember when we blew up a whale.
Yes.
And I remember that story.
Yes, it was a fact. It happened on November 9th, 1970 in Florence, Oregon. A dead whale washed up on shore, and they were going back and forth about how the heck they were going to get rid of this thing. They didn't want to bury it because it would stink. They didn't want to try to tow it back out to sea because it would fall apart and just wash back up on shore again.
Yeah.
So they figured what they would do was they would pack it full of explosives and try to basically vaporize it, and any chunks that were left over, the birds would eat. So they packed it full of explosives, and it did everything but vaporize. It blew a nice chunk out of it, but it basically big softball-sized chunks of putrefying whale rained down on the crowd that gathered to watch it, destroyed a couple of cars, scared all the birds away, and in the end, they ended up burying it anyway. But yes,
crazy.
If you go on YouTube,
I've seen it. I just want to say,
if you go on YouTube, just look up exploding whale.
One of us froze up for a second.
Oh, it
that
probably
you
was me. It was
okay.
probably me. But just go on, yeah, just go on YouTube and look for exploding whale. And it's there. The news story, the whole thing.
That's a good one. So that so who can beat that, right?
It'd be very, very difficult. Oh boy. I think my wife's cousin Ray was there.
Oh, wow.
But he was like, this is not going to end right. This is not going to end well at all. And he split before the actual explosion. He was further back up on a hill watching.
Well, I heard also in that thing that the smell could the stench could be smelled from miles around or whatever in the air, like it was impossible because it was stinky.
Oh
The
yeah.
flesh was rotting in clumps on everything. I mean, what a bad idea, man.
I know. I know. I told you we're a podunk state, man. Remember, our flag has two sides. So
I want to. I've got two that are coming up that are pretty. But since we're talking about that, and by the way, did anybody say they wanted to hear the tortoise story? If you
never saw it.
never saw it,
Never saw it.
so it didn't happen. But here's one that's within in the same area and timeline. So at Gator Park, where I used to work, there was a huge 10, 11 foot girthy alligator that was part of the park. He had his pen, and on the other side were the females, and sometimes they would join them and whatnot. And he lived a long time, and one day he woke up dead, and he was halfway, poor guy, he was halfway up because what happens is that you have these gator pits, as we'd call them, and then it would be like a ramp, like a boat ramp that eases into the water, but it's all fenced in for the gators.
Right.
And the gator just he passed away sitting up halfway, his snout slightly above and out on the ramp side of it that angles upwards. And everybody was, all the workers, and I was there that day, we're trying to figure out how the heck are we going to get this huge savage, because once they start rotting, I mean, that's not going to be good for the park, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
so we're all there trying to figure out and stuff, and nobody wants to get close to the thing because nobody. And I decided to throw down and say, listen, I'll go in, and basically I'll grab him from the mouth on the bottom and hook it in the bone structure of that jaw, and I'll pull. But remember, he weighs hundreds of pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't do it alone. So we had two gigs on each side wrap into the legs of the gator, around the legs, and tie, those gigs that they tie like a noose around.
Mm-hmm.
And or they're nooses, not gigs. And then I pulled out, and they were pushing and pulling, and I was coming up on just getting it out of the water, and they were pushing, and I was pushing, and we're getting it out of the water. And then at one point, it's so heavy, we've got him mostly out of the water. And I said, okay, we got to hold on. And we all stopped, and I let go, and that gator just dropped. His body wasn't elevated. We're dragging him, but his stomach and chest and snout were above, because I'm pulling him. I let him go. He drops down, and my face is looking right at his face, and all the internal gases pushed out from the belly straight into my face. The smell of death. Have you ever heard that song, "The Smell of Death Surrounds You"? Oh, that smell. Can you smell that smell? It was the worst. I had to. I didn't puke, but I was gagging. It was that bad, man.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Well, he was buried out back. They dug a huge,
Mhm.
a huge plot for him, and he went in the ground there. So, since you were talking about the whale, I might as well share my personal
But
story.
nobody thought about blowing him up, huh?
Nobody
Okay. So
thought
point.
about. I mean, that's yeah. Nobody that didn't even cross our mind.
That's a good thing.
His name, by the way, to commemorate it, because he was around for a long while, was Thrasher.
Thrasher.
Yeah,
Well, he did one last thrashing on you before he went into the ground. So.
he sure did. I was the last thrash.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So we got two. I don't know who. Do you know who Mary Curry is?
Uh, Mary Curie or Marie Curie?
Oh, it's Marie Curie.
Okay. Yes, definitely.
So Marie Curie's notebooks are still radioactive.
Yes.
The mother
Their
of modern. Go ahead.
their entire laboratory is still radioactive. Yeah.
Well, what's the story behind her from your memory banks?
Her and her husband, um, um, I want to say Louis,
Okay.
maybe. Anyway, she so far is the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes. She was given a Nobel Prize. She won a Nobel Prize for work she did, but she also won a Nobel Prize for work that she did with her husband.
Okay.
So, but yeah, she's the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes.
So,
But they didn't have any idea that radium was bad for you.
right.
I mean, she used to take a piece of it with her just, to lunch dates and what have you, and let other people see it and touch it and play with it and this, that, and the other. It gave off this new mystical force of energy. She died.
Literally.
Yeah, she died of leukemia. Her daughter died of leukemia. Her husband was killed by a runaway horse, of all things.
Wow, dude. So
But
here it says that so her work with radioactive materials, like you were saying, discovery of elements like polonium and radium, and unfortunately, her research took her a toll on her health. And yeah, the exposure to radioactivity didn't just affect her, but all her belongings, her clothes, furniture, books, and even now to this day, her notebooks have to be stored in a lead box.
right,
That's
yeah,
crazy, dude. Um, well, I learned something new there. So here's a weird one. Here's a weird one.
okay.
Fact: 1 in 3 divorce filings include the word Facebook. What do you think about that?
Oh, why am I not surprised? Why am I not surprised?
So that was the case in 2011, according to the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers.
Mhm.
Though that number was likely has risen since then, we had instances where this is quotes. We had instances where they pull up Facebook in the course of a deposition. Divorce lawyer Marion Rosen told ABC News. So you know how it is. It's just
Yeah.
so that's a crazy one. Facebook has caused a lot of marriages to break.
Well, let's put this where it belongs. The other spouse caused the marriage to break. Facebook was the vehicle they used to break it.
Agreed.
So, Instagram, text messaging, it lives after you do, and it
I,
can be used as evidence against you. So we got to take it easy out there, folks.
well, yeah. I mean, that's one thing. It's all out there now in digital form and whatever. the people that came before us, we're lucky if we have a photograph, or maybe even luckier if we have some sort of 8 millimeter home movie or whatnot, or an audio record at best, or something written in a diary. But we're plastered all over the place.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we're everywhere. We are everywhere. There's a video out on YouTube where a guy, he got, and I don't remember which channel it is. He got on Twitter and just oh my gosh, which he used Twitter, he used Facebook, and he used another social media application on his phone. And he went to like a mall, and he found people that were close by
Okay.
using this other app of where people are. Then he went to their Facebook and their Twitter feeds, found pictures of them, and then just found little personal nuggets that they've thrown out there. And then he walked up to that person and just started talking to him and threw names at him, threw dates at him. Oh, how's Fred doing? How's your husband Fred doing?
Hmm.
Well, he's doing fine. Do you know Fred? Well, I know him a little bit and everything. I'm surprised you don't remember me and this, that, and the other.
That's
Just
crazy.
and just talked to him for a little bit, convinced him that he knew him. Then he let him off the hook and told him, look, I found you just by the stuff that you put on social media. You tweeted that you were going to be here, and I came here. I saw you. I saw your pictures and everything on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. You're throwing all this information out. If I can find you, anybody can.
That's absolutely true. I will say this though. It's not so, since there's so many people, a virtual, majority of people. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but there's so many darn people. It's really hard to sift through that stuff, and you're kind of lost in the shuffle unless somebody is making an effort to actually locate you for whatever either good or bad reason. Because there's people that find each other after years and whatnot.
Sure, there's good and bad that goes with it all, but if you stop and think about the amount of stuff we put out there voluntarily, we are absolutely paranoid about identity theft, and we're paranoid about somebody getting into our bank accounts and stuff like that. But we have no problem getting on Facebook and telling people that we're leaving the house for 2 weeks to go to Hawaii.
Yeah, and the keys are under the doormat.
And the
code to get in is 978999352, and
there are people who know how to read the metadata on a photo. So if you take a picture of a flower in your front yard, the location of that picture is in the metadata.
Right.
Latitude and longitude, where that photo was taken. And I don't know if Facebook strips any of that metadata out of a photo, but folks are not that difficult to find. So, I don't mention anything about any of our travels and where I'm going to go on social media usually until after we get back. Then I'll say, oh yeah, we just got back from such and such, so and so.
Yeah.
Now, usually I have done it a couple of times against my better judgment, but
I wonder. Yeah, I'm not gonna even go down that route, but I was gonna say, I wonder if crime in general, like, okay, this is what I was thinking. The internet's so addicting. In my mind, I'm thinking, is there like a whole sector of like criminals that are like, yeah, I could go rob that bank, but I got to get on Facebook to chat with people. Like, is it so addicting that even criminals decide
Oh man, I don't know. I really don't know. That would be a fun study, though.
Yeah,
do criminals get addicted to social media like the rest of us do? I would imagine some do.
There has to be something to that effect, but whatever.
Maybe that's why they all go out at 3:00 in the morning when none of their friends are up to be on Facebook.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It really is. And this is just the tip of the iceberg because technology is ever growing, in leaps and bounds.
But
Uh,
you're absolutely right. Once it's out there, it's out there. You only have to go to the Wayback Machine on archive.org and look to see old. You can find old, well, not so much Facebook posts, because I don't think they snapshot everybody's Facebook page. I don't imagine they could do that. But if you were in a message forum in 2001, and that message forum is now gone, let's say you were into monster trucks and you were on a monster truck message forum. If that message forum is gone, there's probably a snapshot on the Wayback Machine, and you can go back and find all your old posts.
oh wow,
You know,
that'd be interesting.
I've done that a couple of times on some of the old camping forums I was on, the old pop-up tent trailer and teardrop trailer forums I used to frequent. But just because I couldn't remember something and go back and find it. But yeah,
That's insane.
but once you put it out there, it's out there, and chances are somebody has saved it.
Well, watch out, folks. You've been warned.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so I think that this
I
is a
think,
good place.
yeah, I think we about covered everything I can think of anyway. And I promise you, Eloy, next week I'll come in better prepared.
Well, I think you did excellent, really, to be honest with you, and you even kept the thing going while I went to the restroom for a quick.
For a quick, yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, folks, thanks very much for sticking with us. And I want to correct myself. Marie Curie's husband was Pierre Curie, not Louis. And why I was thinking Louis, I have no idea. But I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Thanks for hanging here. Thanks for participating over in the chat. And don't forget, we have a website where you can contact us or you can listen to past episodes. Ain't that right?
Yeah, it's actually pretty easy. It's trampledunderfootpodcast.com. Go in there. You'll see it's really cool site because we have this tab that says Wayback Machine, and you can catch up on all our killer episodes. There's some good stuff and entertaining. Um, I love listening to podcasts in general. Just kick back with the headphones on and just listen to the conversations. But you have to have the right combination of stuff like history, music, pop culture, and I don't know. I think we cover that.
Weird stuff like exploding whales. So, yeah, hit the podcast. There's a contact us link over there. You can send us a suggestion. You want us to talk about something there. You can read us the riot act if we got something wrong, like I did last week. I'll let you be the judge, and just give it a good go. That's trampledunderfootpodcast.com. We also have a Facebook page over on Facebook where you can find us at Trampled Underfoot Podcast. Leave us a comment. Send us a funny picture, something, anything. Is this thing on?
And remember, every Tuesday we come out with the audio podcast, which you can catch on trampledunderfootpodcast.com and as well as Spreaker. So you can sign up for Spreaker and have your own podcast in minutes, and you can like our page and all that good stuff. They'll give you free time. So there's details of that. You can go and check it out. But I think we're good. I'll catch you guys.
Have a good night.